Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, now the most important questions of this afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. So that's a good start. Let me welcome you to the session on Me and My Society, dealing with economic and social transformations. With the R&I days, we have entered new and uncharted waters in the creation of our new program, as we have entered a process of co-creation. First, within our commission services, and there, Adriana in particular, with your colleagues, we had a very useful and I would really say creative cooperation. We no longer say this is our field or this is your field, but we put things together and try to take the angle of the end user, what it means for them, because for them it's completely uninteresting what service is in the lead. They want to see results. To this end, we have started with an open consultation. This open consultation is based on what we have now with the framework program on Horizon Europe and the specific program. And now we do the strategic planning on how to implement this. And for this, we have put up our consultation in June, which will end on the 4th of October. So you have still time to contribute. And for the first time, we have launched the R&I days, where we want to physically meet with our stakeholders to collect their feedback, to see how they see these things, which helps us in our further planning. And for this, we have mobilized more than 4,000 persons, and maybe one or the other element of our logistics does not yet work brilliantly, but please bear with us. We try to fix things as much as possible. It's the first time that we do this, but I think it is worth giving it a try. For this session, we have the honor to have the Deputy Director General of DG Employment as the chairperson with us, Adriana Sukova. And Adriana, I would like to first give you the floor for your statement before we then go into the different elements with our colleagues for the discussions. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. In fact, I prefer to stand because the lights are really in my eyes and I don't see anyone in the audience. But I would like to welcome you all to this discussion today and tomorrow. And I think that just coming here was quite impressive. Seeing so much potential in discussions, meetings in different halls and in the meeting places, it's really an amazing thing. And I want to congratulate our colleagues from our DG Research that really organized this event. I hope we'll get very positive results and good ideas for the future. I want to underline that, as you know, we have a new commission president-elect, and in her political guidelines, Mrs. von der Leyen underlined that we will need to invest in innovation and research, redesign our economy, and update our industrial policy. But all this is done with the thought about people. And this session now is about changing societies, tackling the socio-economic transformations in Europe. And also we acknowledge that digitalization, artificial intelligence are altering and reshaping our labor markets, our way of life in general. And this is echoed in the respondents to the open public consultation, because Harold already mentioned, we have a lot of replies that we have received so far. You still have the chance by the 4th of October to come back with your ideas and opinions. But I think that all these contributions will be a very important element in improving and finalizing our texts, our proposals, and also they'll be totally adjusted to the needs of you researchers and citizens. This session is in fact dedicated to one of the 3 areas of intervention of the cluster: culture, creativity, and inclusive society. And it is the one about social and economic transformations. As you know, Horizon Europe is the more ambitious budget ever, has the more ambitious budget ever proposed for a framework program on research and innovation, and it's aiming at boosting Europe's innovation capacity, competitiveness, and jobs, and also sustaining our socio-economic model and values. It is also a new start, aiming at establishing a co-design process, as you referred to, and co-creative process with a transparent and participatory approach. Research on society is already well embedded in the program, and it will be like that in the future as well. This is because we live in a fast-changing world, characterized by major and sometimes radical shifts, which can be attributed to drivers of change such as globalization, technological change, automation and digitalization, urbanization and demographic aging. And these forces reshape economies, political parties, cultures, and the interaction among them, and they create systemic changes. Most of all, they do this at an unprecedented pace, putting a strain on our societies, economies, and welfare states, and sometimes resulting in crisis. Several respondents in the open public consultation expressed a need for more social mainstreaming. I was personally glad to hear that, of course, because it's a point of utmost importance for my service. I invite you to intervene in all the other sessions of the Research and Innovation Days to make your case for more socially oriented research and where you feel it's needed. Let me also say a few words on potential synergies of Horizon Europe in other EU-funded programs, for instance, the future European Social Fund Plus. The European Social Fund Plus has a budget of 101 billion euro, and it will remain the key instrument for investing in people, investing in human capital development, and also supporting the research and innovation dimension of this development. ESF Plus, as we call it, will be able to support the capacity building and career development of teachers, researchers, including holders of Horizon Seal of Excellence Award. We've made sure that our regulations provide for this possibility and that the rules are as much as possible aligned to each other. Furthermore, the European Social Fund Plus will be able to upscale the implementation of innovation curricula for education and training programs developed within Horizon Europe, as well as new delivery modes and new forms of cooperation, such as the blueprint for sectoral cooperation for skills. Importantly, the ESF Plus will also be able to promote and upscale social innovation developed by Horizon Europe, including transnationality, to help member states and regions tackle the socio-economic transformations that they face. Yet, the main objective of this new session is to collect further feedback for the cluster culture, creativity, and inclusive society, so that to help as much as possible European researchers, innovators, and society at large with the funding that's made available now. The panel of experts today will help us shed light on the evolution of work, productivity, sustainable and inclusive growth, and inequalities, the deep impact of technological transformations, and the opportunities and challenges of migration in times of change. I would introduce Diane Coyle, who is co-director to the Bennett Institute for Public Policy, leading its research and technology policy, the measurement of progress and productivity, and she is a professor and public speaker, a TED talker, which is putting some expectations on you, Diane. She will talk about the content of the socio-economic transformation intervention and on the economic and labor market transformation, including digitalization. Liam Patuzzi is a policy analyst at Migration Policy Institute Europe, and he focuses on immigrant integration policies, labor market migration management, and EU free movement. So his current interests in the area of integration policy include the link between transformation of work and immigrant integration, as well as local level innovations. He will speak about the relation between migration and the changing labor market, and I will give the chance to Harald to introduce a former colleague, Basedup. But after that, you'll be leading the kind of exchange and discussion, and also we'll be listening to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Thank you very much. And before introducing Basudeb, let me just recall to you that in the field of transformation, it is a very vast field. Now, let me first say what we will not do in this field. We are not the technicians to work on the technical part of the transformations, but we want to have a look at what are the implications of these transformations on the individual and on society, and how can we prepare the appropriate responses to make of these challenges opportunities. This has very much to do with the future labor market. It has very much to do with education and with training. We've got there the opportunities. If we set the scene in the right way, then it can work. And a translation of that is that in the new program, we want to be more human-centered. And one of the examples of that is that our directorate in which we are working is now called the People's Directorate. And there we've got the social sciences together with health. And this already is one of these elements. But now, without any further ado, I would like to move on to our first speaker, Basudeb Chowdhury, who has been working in our unit on SSH, I think for, is it 5.5? 3 years. And I can only say that during the period Basudeb has been here, it has been a great pleasure of being able to rely on his expertise, on his way of putting the different services into contact, and in formulating the right topics and questions for the future. Basudeb, you are now with the French Ministry of Research. I should not hide from you that, from the audience, that in the very near future you will be the French representative in our societal in our societal 6 program committee. And I would kindly invite you to set the scene for our discussions and to provoke a little bit our audience so that we get the feedback we need. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Harold. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for your kind words. Since you're giving us the authorization today to be provocative, like you with the previous group, the first provocative statement, let me just quote a former Director General of DGRTD who said something very provocative aimed mainly at the SSH community. He said, "I'm not interested in the papers that you're publishing. Give me policies that I can implement from next Monday morning." Okay, so now that's a tough order, isn't it? But that's the kind of ball game that we continuously have to persuade our community, the AHSSS community, if I use the terms that were used a little while back by our colleague, to get into. And that's very difficult because particularly in this entire area, and Harold has squarely put me onto it. I do bear, along with my colleagues, a certain responsibility in the current shape of Cluster 2, and in particular of socio-economic transformations, in which I was a member of the Sherpa group for almost 2 years, till the point that I left. And we did try to give it a specific shape on very complex questions, and I'll try to illustrate very precisely. For example, you take the drivers of socioeconomic transformation in the modern world, say over the last 20 years or so, that have been studied in the current and the previous framework program. You take major areas of phenomenon like globalization and technological progress. Okay, now they are very present in the public debate. They are present in the political debate, and right across the political spectrum, it's a huge blame game as to who is responsible for what. Is globalization responsible for problems X, Y, Z, and all its attending effects? Is it technological progress? And again, the public. Well, by the way, I was told there'd be citizens here. I don't know if there's any citizens here. I see mainly stakeholders.
We all citizens. First.
Okay, I'm just being provocative. Okay, so in the dialogue with citizens that we are supposed to have now, if some of the greatest names in economics in the world, say Krugman and Olivier Blanchard, don't agree with each other on the respective roles of globalization and technological progress in affecting employment, migration flows, etc. How do you expect the so-called common man or the citizen to make something out of it. So precisely in order to, and certainly, I mean, again, I'd say that we can't say something definitive about this for next Monday morning. So that's another problem. So it requires long research, it requires slow research, and what the framework program tries to do is to give a grammar of arguments that enables a long to medium term analysis on these problems, and particularly to highlight, as I was saying, the very complex interactions that underlie this process, to separate them out, to feed them with data, to generate what we, in our everyday jargon, call evidence-based policy. So that's the first point. In all this, and I'm sure it'll come up again, now all this is supposed to provide inclusive and sustainable growth. Sustainable in the Brundtland sense of the term, that is both socially and environmentally sustainable. Now, that's very fine, but again, if you try to link this to political debates that are going on, then when one sees figures like, and they've been floating around for quite a few years, that right now, and this will also be highlighted in a new book by Piketty that's coming out in a few months' time in English, and which has already come out in French. The figure that 1% of the world population holds something between 50 to 70% of the world's income and wealth is something that obviously leads to what was called a little while back this crisis of democracy. So these are also important elements of the socio-economic transformation that the entire framework of the program, both in the part that deals with democracy, which is not the part we discuss here, and socio-economic transformation, but also culture, which brings up questions of identity, are dealing with. So this is the main thrust of what we're trying to do, and obviously the objective is, and this will be taken up by Dianda, our next speaker, the entire problem of social mobility and its aspects. Now, economic and social mobility obviously is not the same between developed and developing countries. The contexts are very different. So spelling out the mechanisms is also part of what the program is supposed to do. Okay, so this is, I don't, can I take one and a half minutes more? Yes. No, okay, I'll do it in half a minute more. Okay? So studying indicators, etc., is the main thing. Now, I'll end with something provocative again. Now, obviously, I was involved till a certain point with what's called the orientation towards the strategic plan, which also gives a grammar of the kind of Europe that the Commission would like to see is built up. Protective Europe, fair Europe, etc. Now, in the part that concerns us in socio-economic transformations and fair Europe, now, what exists right now at this point of time, and what is going through the consultation process, and that's why I want to bring it to your notice, is extremely lopsided. There is a large part that deals with health. Health, of course, is a primary pillar of the question of fairness and equality, but it's not the only pillar. The entire areas of discussion of inequalities to do with gender, income, space, wealth that are missing, the question of taxes. So we really need to put a lot more into this discussion because it's still an open process, and that's where you come in, so that you read this document, there's still time, in order to react to this. Now, these are comments that we can make as experts, but it needs to be a large debate. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Very many thanks, Basudeb. I think you've set the scene. What we're good at is to analyze why a situation has come about. We might be less good with the solutions for the future, and I know that forecasts are very difficult to make, in particular if they concern the future, but this is exactly what we need to do. And our former Director General has said he doesn't want to have papers on the table, but we should come up with policies to tackle the challenges and make opportunities out of it. Now, in our first round of discussions, we would be very grateful if we could get your feedback on what does it need to get from an analysis to a proposal for a policy which can be implemented. What are the ingredients you see, and what is science able to provide in that context? The floor is open. Yes, please. Microphone.
Can you hear me, maybe? It's not an answer to you. It's
Another
more
question.
like a reflection, because you both mentioned the interest just to have a new policy on Monday, and I was wondering if it's the same for other sciences. So do you have the solution of cancer for Monday? Do you have the, I don't know, the medicine for whatever on Monday? Are we asking for the same to all the sciences we fund? Because maybe this will be an issue to take on also. Thank you.
So what about the point on prosperity, for example, Basudeb has mentioned, and also the inequalities related to it? As we see that there is, in general, more prosperity, and that the gap between the have and have-nots is getting bigger. Have we reflected this in our orientation paper? Are there elements which are dear to you that we should include? If you would like to make a point on that. I see one colleague asking for the floor.
Jari Ojala, University of Jyväskylä, Finland. I think that in these inequality studies, we need to have the numbers right, that we have inequality in health, in wealth, in gender, and so forth. But what we also need is a human factor, how people feel. Sometimes the numbers don't tell everything when you look at the taxation records, but then you should also ask the people, and that is something that should be added into the programs.
Okay, so that would be that there is a discrepancy between the perceived inequalities and the equalities as far as the figures are concerned. Yeah, and if you are well off and you are amongst millionaires, you might feel very poor, although if compared to the average of the world, you are not at all. In this respect, are there any comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Dana from the Halle Institute for Economic Research, and I have two comments to make. Maybe we should, maybe it's also important to understand the role of institutions like unions and European work councils as well, and looking at rising income and inequality and labor market polarizations. That's my first point. And then I do have another point concerning also cultural heritage. Maybe it's also interesting to understand different experiences made by Eastern countries in the period of socialism and this rapid rapid transformation from a plan to a market economy. And maybe we need to take a step back and look what happened, and look and like.
Maybe do make a mistake.
Exactly. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yes.
Adriana, you wanted to react on the last question.
Well, I enjoy all the comments, of course, but I was wondering your points about how we involve workers' councils and trade unions, and also making sure that there is as much as possible balance and equality is a very important question. Of course, we're working a lot with national social partners, with non-governmental organizations. We are trying to involve, and we do involve with the Commission of President Juncker very regularly. Before each Economic Council, we organize a tripartite social summit to invite the trade unions and the business organizations to discuss the agenda of the Economic Council, to hear the views and the ideas on behalf of the social partners. It is not only about institutions, it's not only about the European Union. You know, I'm sure that many of you have heard about the European Pillar of Social Rights, which was adopted or proclaimed in November 2017, where there are 20 principles that the European Union has agreed to, using this as compass that we should provide equal access and equal opportunities. We should provide for fair working conditions for everyone, and also we should take care of the social inclusion element. And these 20 principles now, I have to quote again the political guidelines and the speech of Mrs. von der Leyen. She has asked DG Employment to develop now an action plan, but this action plan definitely will cover not only actions on behalf of the Commission. It is a lot of actions that should be done by the national authorities and by the non-governmental, I include in the non-governmental sector also trade unions and all social partners, because there is limited power on behalf of the Commission for the area of social, and we cannot impose to member states a lot of policies. We can only guide them. We can prepare directives and recommendations, but we cannot impose regulations. We want to be sure that this is becoming a more wide approach to assessing where we are, how can we improve not only the working conditions or the relationships between employers and employees, but also how to make sure that the ownership of this pillar of social rights, because it was really proclaimed by all the heads of states and governments from the European Union, but also European Commission, European Parliament, European Council President, that this is becoming a joint effort. And everybody says that it's very useful to have measures at national level that can help or can provide equal access to employment, to education, and education is becoming a lifelong learning process. Education is not one-off finishing when you're 18 or 21 or 24. It's a constant process which is inspired by the transformation that we were talking about. We're living in such a digitalized world where change is happening so quickly that we hardly catch up. And on your second point about the transition between centrally planned and market economy, there are always lessons learned, and it was a first one. The transition was, by itself, something that nobody had ever done. So inevitably, there are things that could have been done better. There are things that, I can speak about the country I know best, things that could have been probably not done at all. But we have political class. We assign this political class to take decisions. And this is our democracy in Europe. You know, there's nothing better invented than democracy. So we vote, we give power to a number of people, and then they develop their policy measures. We vote because they have come up with ideas. And we say, okay, we aspire to these ideas. You have to do it. How do you achieve an objective is really one gives a lot of possibilities to take different ways and different paths and get to the same objective. So for this path, this decision or design, we need the intervention of partners, we need the involvement of everyone, so that the objective that we agree we have to achieve takes a way or a path which is really acceptable by everyone and supported by everyone. So I think that the social sciences are really a very interesting area of analysis, especially on this area, because different countries who lived through this transition took different paths, always with the same objective, getting to market economy status and so on, but they have different experiences, and hopefully with a lot of information and analysis on what are the experiences and where they delivered best, there could be some projection for the future.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the second block in our discussions, and I invite Diane to make your statement and invite our colleagues to react on it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stand up in the interest of visibility. I'm an economist, and I've specialised in looking at the digital economy, so I see things very much through that lens. In fact, it's 25 years since I first experienced the internet, when somebody showed me a webcam on the Golden Gate Bridge, and 22 years since I first wrote about it. And it's quite hard to remember now what life was like then. There was no online shopping, no social media, no Google search and access to the world of information out there, no maps, no travel information. But the technology has also completely rewired businesses and the world of work, and that's going on. They're what economists call a general purpose technology, which just means they change everything. it's bound to be disruptive when that happens, and there are some concerns now that we should be looking at. But it's important to remember that this has been going on for a long time already, 25 years. We've already seen a lot of change. The technologies enabled production to be reshaped. They've already enabled a lot of automation. And that wave, especially in the mid-1990s, devastated, scarred many communities around Europe, including the one that I grew up in, and we're still paying the price of that. So we've already seen some of these transformations, and we know that we haven't been very good at dealing with them. Already some parts of the economy are dramatically changed, media, finance, communications, and that's happening now to all the rest. So the question is, what are the current trends? What are the research and policy questions that we ought to be addressing urgently to respond to it? And perhaps this is provocative and perhaps not, but because it's a short intervention, I've picked out a few things that I think are really important. I'm in a new policy institute at the University of Cambridge where we are all about this interface between the research and the policy. And so these are all areas where I think policymakers could derive something from research, maybe not on Monday, but maybe in 100 days, and certainly in 2 or 3 years. So the first of those is about the world of work and automation and what that's going to do. We've seen a big increase in the wage premium paid to people who've got the skills to work with the new technologies. If you look at earlier industrial revolutions, responding to new waves of technology by providing different kinds of education and training were a very big part of how the inequalities and the disruptions were addressed. So thinking about skills and education, thinking about labour market institutions more broadly, because there are great differences between countries in the degree of inequality and social mobility. There's a lot of research needed there. And of course, in any country, education reform can become quite highly politicised. So having the evidence base to address that and think about what skills are needed over what parts of a people's lifetime is a really important challenge. And in fact, the most important to address the inequality issues that Basudeb started out by talking about. So that's one. The second one is market power. And now a number of countries, the Commission, the UK, Germany, also Australia and Japan, have recently published reports looking at the concentration of market power in digital industries. I was on the UK panel chaired by Jason Furman from Harvard. And there's an emerging consensus, I think, among the community of competition economists and lawyers about how we can start to introduce policies to make sure that digital markets are properly contestable, that market power is not permanent, and that the political consequences of that don't get embedded. And I think we still need to find out more, because a lot of the data to understand these markets is held by the big digital companies themselves. But we can make some progress there, and quite quickly. That takes me on to a third thing, which is the role of data. And one of the things all of those inquiries has identified is the importance of data as a barrier to entry into these markets. But there are obviously huge concerns about the explosion of data, its use in AI, and what the consequences are. And some of these are about privacy and online harms. Some of them are very much economic concerns as well, the bias of algorithms and so on. But as well as addressing the concerns, I think it's very important to understand how to use data for public benefit. It's got very distinctive economic characteristics. It's public good. Governments should be investing in the provision of data. They should be making sure that it's accessible, and that public services are also using data to deliver benefits for people. A lot of the focus has been on ethics. Ethics is important, but it's not everything. Thinking about the business models, why companies behave the way they do, and the governance, what are the trustworthy institutions that will allow that data to be used, is my third area. Fourth is innovation. Of course, innovation drives productivity. It's the fundamental thing in economic growth. And for people getting the benefits, having access and it being affordable is the most important thing. But I think we need to look much more at the social roots of innovations. Why do certain things come about and others not? Why do some technologies get invented and others not? If you have all of the innovation in digital being done by affluent white men, you're going to get a lot of fitness apps. and not a lot of other things. And I don't think there's nearly enough research on the social origins of innovation, how to encourage diversity in innovation, and how to grow different kinds of companies. My fifth thing is that we don't know enough. This is my research, so I'm biased about this, but we have an economic statistics framework that's fantastic for measuring the mid-20th century economy, and that doesn't exist anymore. We don't know how much companies are using the cloud. We don't know how much data there is. We don't understand how to measure the impact of free digital goods. We don't know how many people are doing second jobs and working in the gig economy. There's an awful lot that we don't understand about the economy, so I think that's really important to fill that gap. And particularly the labour market stuff. Who is doing what? What are they getting paid for it? My sixth is that although I think economic statistics are important, I love them. This is something that stops people talking to you at parties, I have to say. Thinking more broadly about well-being, and this has already come up in a couple of comments. We focus a lot on GDP. I've had a couple of conversations today where people said, well, that's a real concrete thing, and actually it's not at all. It's a construct. It's an abstract idea. There are lots of judgments that go into it, and it's not really giving us a very informative picture of the economy at the moment. And we know it's been unequally distributed. We also need to understand better the distribution and the impact of lots of other things on people's well-being and how they interact. Natural capital, access to clean air and green space, the impact that has on human capital and productivity. We don't really understand those connections. And consulting people about what really improves the quality of their lives and having a broader set of measures. Finally, and this is really important, this has to be interdisciplinary. There's a saying that the world has problems, the universities have departments. We're not very good at joining up across departments. We don't have the incentives in academic life to do that. Governments, the Commission, spend a lot of money on scientific and technical research. It's all wasted unless the social science is in there as well. So make it interdisciplinary. But governments have to also make it interdepartmental. There have been too many silos also in policy. So trying to join up the different areas of research and the different actors in policy, both European, national and local, is my final area of importance. So I think I'll stop there and hope people have got some other ideas as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. I think you've now sketched out our multi-annual work program for transformations.
It's a big canvas.
So I think, yeah, it's a very big and vast area. Now, please comments on the points Diane has pointed out and has mentioned. Do you agree with the points she has made? Are these the essential points we should tackle in the future? There is...
Thanks very much, Diane. It's Neil Forbes, Coventry University, UK. Absolutely agree with what you've just said. And to link it to the previous session, we were sitting in this room talking about the importance of arts and humanities and embedding those and integration and so on and so forth. The value of the arts and humanities in terms of creativity. You mentioned, what trying to investigate and understand what the sources of innovation are. We could link that to creativity, but also, of course, in terms of the whole agenda around health and well-being. And finally, you didn't mention, but if I may mention it, the contribution to the cultural and creative industries.
Thank you. Sorry, Jane, you wanted to take the floor, or did I misinterpret you? Sorry. sorry. Yes, please.
Yes, Robert Peterson from Roskilde University in Denmark. I think I agree with almost everything you said, and I think one of the things that's extremely important is the idea we have a cluster that's very much dedicated to social sciences and humanities, But I think the key in listening to some of the other sessions is how we integrate social sciences and humanities research in some of these more technological areas. Because it's all about understanding not just how we behave as consumers, but how we behave as citizens. So I hope that's something that will be strengthened even further in the next program.
Thank you very much. Just one remark I'd like to make. This was exactly the point we were discussing at the previous session in this room, to integrate SSH, although we all agree that we should find better terms for that, because this is something not only the social scientists and humanities people really understand. So we should have something which is more open, that people really know what it is about. Now, we were talking about measuring growth, measuring GDP. Well, is growth really an end in itself? What about happiness and well-being? The OECD has produced quite important papers on that, because the economic output is one element. Second element related to this is that we are no longer really able to measure the new things which have happened with the old methods. And the third element is, what is the goal? The goal is to achieve happiness and to achieve the well-being of our people. Are there any comments for the research in that area? Sorry, I forgot. I think there was also a colleague who wanted to take the floor, which I have ignored you, sorry.
It's not about GDP, though. Is
no
that
problem.
okay? Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Stavroula Dimitriadis. I'm from Eurofound, a European agency. We're based in Dublin. I appreciate the points, Diane, the points you made, and I could agree with all of them. I would like to pick up on the point you made on innovation. And you mentioned the issue of social routes to innovation, why some come about, why some companies come about with innovation, some don't, and also why do companies behave the way they do. I think it's time to reflect on the human factor in innovation. And this is something we also see in our research. We try to highlight the human factor because it's not all about technology. Every time we talk about innovation in the companies, we tend to talk about technology being introduced. Yes, it is technology, but it's also people who introduce it. And there are practices at work that we have to reflect upon, because we have seen in our research that very few companies introduce involvement, employee involvement, to the extent that people feel obliged to participate, they feel stimulated. So that's an idea I would like to submit.
Thank you very much. I think there is one comment also on this. Just let me add to this. I think this is exactly the big problem in particular Europeans have. We've got old shelves which are plenty of brilliant technological solutions, but they stay in the drawers because nobody applies them. And I think there we really need to work on having a much more holistic approach. It's very difficult and a very slow process from what we've seen so far. Sorry, but next speaker, please.
Thank you. Maria Lindholm from the Swedish Research Council. I would like to, I also appreciated many of your points, Diane. I think you had many relevant, well, you framed it very well. I would like to highlight the issue of digital literacy, because you were talking about data, but that also covers education and skills and inequalities, etc. So that could be, I think that could be a focal area for the program.
Thank you very much, and this will certainly be one of these elements. We will discuss it, by the way, on Thursday in the Demography workshop. Now, let me move on to our third speaker, Liam. If you could, Liam, sorry.
No problem.
If you could make your statement and invite our people for reactions.
Sure, absolutely. So I will sit, just because I noticed that my leg got a bit numb because of how I'm sitting. So I think it's safer for all of us. So yeah, I was asked to speak about migration, how migration fits into this picture. Well, I'm based at a think tank that deals with migration policy and integration policy here in Brussels. So I'm just going to maybe sketch out some of the big questions, and specifically in two areas. One is the sort of like economic immigration, particularly to Europe in this context, and how that might, be impacted or also impact a changing world of work and changing labor markets. And the other one will then be about inclusion of migrants in, a world of work that is undergoing profound transformation, as we've heard in the previous intervention. So, of course, one factor to bring in this situation, we've already mentioned digitization, technology, etc. I think demography is also quite interesting. I think we're all aware that there are important, remarkable trends going on there, and that in the coming decades, I think that will lead to, most forecasts agree that it will lead to a shrinking workforce in different scenarios, no matter what migration scenario we take into account, and also to an increased dependency ratio. So less people, fewer people kind of like sustaining the social system, the social benefit system, the welfare state for the entire population. So migration, of course, can be a force to help meet future skill needs and also to support European welfare states. It can soften these shrinking trends in the labor force, and also help address skill needs, not only the current ones, but also the future ones. And I think here, maybe the caveats or the questions really start. So determining skill needs, we've heard, is already quite hard at present, because there are different methodological approaches on how you do that to underlie your immigration policy as a government. Do you ask employers? But then again, they may have very specific incentives on flagging a skill gap maybe before it's really that acute. Do you ask other stakeholders? How do you involve them? And imagine how tricky it is then to forecast what the skill needs might be in 10 years. In 20 years, we've heard that economists do not even agree. So even the experts cannot really find a common ground on how the economy and the sectors will develop, and how technology will impact our jobs. Another question is what type of work? We know that the most immigration systems at the moment, or systems for economic immigration, are based on the traditional employer-employee model. But we also know at the same time that with more atypical, non-standard forms of work, we have an increase in freelancers, in independent workers, etc. So how do you adapt your very often employer-sponsored immigration models to that? Another one, what types of skills do we take into account? For instance, there is quite a consensus, not a full one, but more and more we hear how important these transferable, these soft skills will be to succeed in labor markets of the future. These can be interpersonal skills, but also critical thinking, problem solving, all the skills that will make you adaptable in a world where technology will change the ways our jobs are carried out and the substance of our work. And some notes of caution, of course, also in opening new channels for economic immigration, for labor migration to tackle our skill needs. It is really important not to see immigration as a replacement for investments in skills. So it should not lead to a lack of incentives to invest into these systems for lifelong learning and adapting the workforce in the country for the challenges of the future. Now moving on to, of course, the transition is quite fluid here. Moving on to the next area, the one of integration, inclusion into changing labor markets. We have done some work here just to try to understand how the integration policy of the future might look like, and also to flag to policymakers what some of the conundrums might be in integrating migrants or upskilling migrants now for we're not sure what jobs we will have in the future. So some trends that we are observing is that there is a hollowing out of the labor market. So middle-skilled, middle-wage jobs are sort of slowly declining, and there is an increasing polarization, more jobs at the higher skills end and also some jobs at the lower scales then. And also we have this polarization between full-time and stable jobs and the gig economy. So focusing on the gig economy now, we asked what are potentially the opportunities and risks for immigrant integration. In terms of opportunities, non-standard work is less formalized. So maybe some of the barriers that immigrants encounter at the moment in highly regulated employment might be easier to circumvent for newcomers there. So it's more accessible, it's perhaps easily accessible income, at least in some of these jobs. On the other hand, we are all aware, I think, of the risks. So precarity, dead-end careers, there is really no investment in skills, social insecurity, and also oftentimes these jobs can be quite isolated and isolating. So that sort of like function that work has always had as an engine of integration, not only economic but also social integration, might be at risk in that case, because you cannot really form social capital. So maybe these are just some of the issues there. I think in terms of what the political consequences might be, well, of course, that's a very open field. But I think it will be really important for governments, it's fair to say, to invest in immigration systems that are transparent, that are clear to the citizens, so where the objectives are clearly stated and also results are monitored, that there are credible definitions, for instance, of what a skill need, a skill gap is or will be, that workers, let's say, workforces in the country can understand. That, most importantly, I think that skill needs, skill investments, so investments in education, lifelong learning, etc., also from the side of employers, really be made accessible for workforces already in the country. Otherwise, I think increasing polarization we have witnessed is one of the best ingredients that can really fuel also the scapegoating of migrants in periods of insecurity and periods of high unemployment and disruption. So these are just some thoughts, I think, in terms of what the research might be in these fields. Of course, very happy to hear your feedback on this. I think one area that we find quite interesting is to see indeed more in detail what sort of like the implications of the gig economy are for migrant populations, and also how technological advances might help integration processes on the, at the workplace, but also in society in general. And of course, tying to what has just been said in terms of like not only focusing on economic factors, but also looking at other dimensions, social dimensions, etc. I think maybe more precise research that measures the path to social cohesion and also the indicators and factors of social cohesion could be an interesting field of study. But these are just some ideas, and I'm really curious to hear what the feedback will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liam. And I think you've managed to put the migration question into a greater context of also developing skills, the labor market, and elements related to this, because what we have experienced now with the latest waves of migrants coming in is that on the one hand, people believe it's now over because the big wave is gone. And now the climate and environment is the big issue, and we forget about migration. Migration will stay with us whether we like it or not for a long time. But even if the figures go down, we have not yet found good systems to integrate the ones who are already there.
Absolutely.
In the countries, because they sometimes sit there for 2 or 3 years without having any training or job, and this in the end cannot work. So I would kindly invite you for some feedback to the proposals and views Liam has expressed. Please, Alice.
I would just like to mention something that we've been doing in the Netherlands quite recently, and I think that Germany has a similar program. What we're doing, we're offering actually funding for researchers from migrant countries, and we're asking, consortia that we are already funding we're matchmaking them, and we're offering them actually a job for 2 years within this consortium so that they can start building their network. So this is something that we are doing within the Netherlands and in Germany, I believe, to actually get at least that part of the migrant community back into work again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alice. Please speak.
Thank you. I will like to reflect on your issue about how to integrate migrants.
Mm-hmm.
We just got the grant from the European Commission for a project proposal called Welcoming Spaces, where on the one hand shrinking areas are linked to newcomers and this project, we made it in Utrecht University with researchers from 4 different faculties.
Mm-hmm.
And we include also local organizations, NGOs, but also banks, businesses. And the areas in Spain, in Italy, and Germany, there are a lot of so-called shrinking areas where people, where newcomers are more than welcome. So the name of the project, Welcoming Spaces. I think this is an example how both dynamics can be influencing positively each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one more statement or question. Yes, please.
Nick Brunsveld from the University of Amsterdam. I'd like to go back to the GDP question a little bit. So I really like Diane Colwell's contributions, but some of those issues have been raised decades ago, right? Amartya Sen raised some of the points, of course not about the gig economy and stuff like that. Could you say why they haven't been picked up? And could that inform us about how we can make it work this time? That we do get rid of GDP and start looking at capabilities or other ways of measuring well-being?
I think it's like changing technical standards. It's like switching from driving on the left to driving on the right. It's very hard to be the only people who make the switch. So you've got to get the whole community of technocrats and politicians and statisticians to agree to make the change at the same time. So it's been about building up enough momentum and also figuring out what to change to. Because you can't have some people switching to driving down the middle. You've got to all go do the same thing. And I think that's now starting to happen, but that's my explanation for why it takes so long.
Thank you very much, Diane. Now, before giving the floor for the final remarks to our chair, let me just recall to you that the open consultation is still open. We are very happy for receiving your comments. And please, on transformation, we also have our village, our booth in the village for Societal Challenge 6, where you can fix meetings with our team so that you can share your views with us to make sure that they will be reflected in the reviewed, Irene, you've just rightly mentioned it's not Societal Challenge 6, this is the current program, but it's the cluster number 2 of the new program. Sorry, I was still mentally in the current and not in the future. My apologies for this. This now leads me to concluding our session, and before concluding, I would like to give the floor to you, Adriana, for your final remarks.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all the colleagues, first the interventors, the panelists here, for some very interesting ideas, but also from the audience there were additional ideas for research, and I would like to assure you that we agree what should be researched. We also got some idea about how to do it, because we have to break silos, and it's interdisciplinary for sure. Our societal analysis, our societal research is linked not only to the person and the personality, but it's also about the world around people. And it makes even more important involving in this society other experts from other areas. I think that the world of work is changing quicker than we can research it. But it doesn't mean that we should not, for sure. We should research how we are changing, what is the pace, how often things change, and how often we have to adapt to that. And that is one of the considerations for the future about skills and upskilling people who will definitely require a more often upskilling of their competences, better understanding of the world around them. There are already projects ongoing, and we have one of the agencies here, Eurofund. We also have an agency, CEDEFOP, which is developing a project to identify on the basis of all job offers, the big data of job offers, what are the skills that are mostly demanded and needed region-wise, country-wise, EU level. So this is also an important information for the decision-making process at EU level. Of course, the Commission is proposing, and then member states discuss and approve, and the Parliament gets involved in many of our areas. But it is important that we have a critical mass of people who support the direction of our policy, and also we are best equipped to propose a policy measure once we have a lot of evidence about it. And I want to tell you that we'll be looking very much for the results of your research. We are not asking for a result that we can implement next week, because in our area it doesn't work. But I believe that there will be very good projects in the next programming period with Horizon Europe that will help our decision-making process to be really people-focused, people-centered, and also acceptable by all the European citizens. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.